You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Friday show talking about the grain market with K-State grain economist Dan O'Brien. Dan, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Shelby.
Dan, we recently had the WASDE and other USDA reports come out and wanting to talk through the different commodities and how those reports impacted what we're seeing for them in the market. And starting off with corn.
Well, the markets responded positively to that report. They came out on Friday's closing in reports. The USDA again annual crop production report, the World Ag Supply Demand Estimates report, the WASDE report, and the grain stocks report all came out, and some others for other commodities. And by the time all that hit, corn closed up on that Friday up at to 470 and a half. And as often happens, and research has shown this, that in the first 1 or 2 days after a report, you get most of the response. And we've been kind of true to form on that. Again, the market pays attention to that on day one, and then afterwards starts looking around and said, "Oh, we've absorbed all that, and now where do we go?" So anyway, that's kind of what happened. And for corn, you saw the upfront March contract closed up on that Friday. Again, Friday, January the 10th, up to 470 and a half, up 14 and a half cents. It's interesting that the new crop Dees contract closed also up about 3 and 4 cents, up to 450 and a quarter. So if in doubt and the corn market doesn't know what to do, it probably goes to 450. And that's about what happened. And the in the broader picture, what occurred in that supply demand balance sheet was a little bit of change in planted acres, small decrease. Harvested acres actually decreased about 0.2% change, not a lot. The big issue came with a change in yield, a drop of 3.8 bushels an acre, almost 4 bushels an acre, down to 179.3. It had been an estimate of 183.1. So that in itself is a bit of a head scratcher. I think the USDA will have internally have discussions as to how that error occurred, because that's unexpected error. It was outside the pre-report estimates of yield. The low end of pre-report estimates coming into that report was 181.3. So this came in 179.3, 2 bushels below that. So got some thinking to do with regard to that. And I'm not critical of them, but that's a big change. So by the time that occurred, then the production number dropped from 15.14 billion bushels down to 14.86 or 87 billion, a drop of 276, about 275, 276 million bushels. You brought that through the rest of the supply demand balance sheet with a little bit of a decrease in feed usage and a decrease of about, pardon me, 50 million bushels lower feed residual usage, 25 million bushels lower exports, total usage down 75 million, but you add that to the drop in supplies, and ending stocks ended up projected at 1.54 billion bushels stocks to use, and that was down about just under 200 million bushels. And the stocks to use now, instead of being 11.4, 11.5% stocks to use estimated for the 24-25 marketing year ending August 31st, now you're down to 10.2%. So sizable change. The USDA did, in the midst of that, make a change to the higher side, a modest change, I'd say, given all of the I guess the tightness calibrations that they have. Uh, Added about 15 cents to the corn price, $4.10 up to 4.25. I've come in and on in other analysis looked at what the price is that the futures are now projecting. They're that 4.25 plus about 10 to 12 cents, about 4.35, 4.37 thereabouts. So with all of that, you have a kind of a change in what had occurred. The uh, grain stocks to use report was a key element of what led to some of these changes. You did see overall usage, September, November 24 disappearance of 4.56 billion, a little bit higher than had occurred just a small amount higher than had been occurred from the same period last year. But really, the issue comes down to expectations. What were they expecting? And obviously, the market wasn't expecting that type of change. So you dig into the numbers, you look at Kansas corn. So it's always interesting to see. Yes, I know what the national numbers are. What happened in our backyard? So by the time the this last final end of year report came about, we ended up with a projection of 6.3 million acres of corn planted in Kansas, ending and a final area harvested about 5.8. Okay, so understand that, and that'd be the highest certainly, well, 2022 was 4.44 million acres, 5.15 in 23, and here we're at 5.8 million harvested this year. So that's moving to the high side. And you did see Kansas corn yields adjusted. We saw 115 bushel an acre yields in 2022, and some of those years affected by a lot of droughts, particularly in the West. 119 bushels an acre in 2023, and this year, final number, 129 bushels per acre. So still for Kansas, moving to the high side, growth in terms of corn yields. And the final number, whereas back in 2022, we had 510.6 million bushels produced, 612.85 in 2023. Here in 2024, a jump up to 748 million bushels and change. So almost 750 million bushels of corn production in the state. And it had to come from somewhere, and some of where it come from. When we talk about wheat, you'd seen kind of a decrease in Kansas acreage occurring in there. So that's probably where some of those corn acres came from. So interesting to watch. You look at the national yields for around the globe, around the U.S. In the 3I states, you ended up with Illinois yields at 198 bushel an acre, Iowa 217, 177 pardon me, I said that wrong. 211 in Iowa, 217 in Illinois, 198 in Indiana, 206. Out to the west, we're breaking 200 bushels with in the Northwest, Idaho 206, Oregon 208, 235 in Washington. So some great yields up in those parts of the country. Even Arizona 225. I imagine most of that's irrigated. So quite a bit going on there. With grain sorghum, you also saw some minor changes in the supply demand balance sheet, in that the NASS raised the grain sorghum national estimate up to for yields up to 61.3 bushels per acre, a 23 million bushel increase in production nationally, up to 344. And by the time you go through the rest of the balance sheet, you saw feed residual use up about 5, food seed industrial usage up about 20. So if exports didn't change, and if we don't export sorghum and we're not making much change for feed usage, that's going into food seed industrial usage, i.e. ethanol. So we had that occurring. Would say just quickly then for sorghum in Kansas, we had seen the Kansas acre. We've seen the Kansas sorghum acreage over the last 3 years go from 3.3 million in 22, 3.6 in 23, estimated at 3 million planted, so down a little bit in 24. Harvested acres up 2.8 million. The Kansas yield it's been a trend upwards. 39 bushels in 22, 52 bushels an acre in 23. This year, 65. So it's pretty strong, and up to 182 million bushels produced in the state in 24 compared to 169 in 23 and 105 in 22. So pretty good year great year production wise for feed grains. And with this news in the national corn market, some little bit better prospects for prices for both those crops heading off into 2025.
Dan, Really just nothing shocking then when we look at the grain, sorghum, and corn market from the WASDE report and other USDA reports.
Um, Maintaining strong usage in ethanol production and actually some increase on the sorghum side. I would say we'd seen before the corn harvest started that there were official sorghum bids at Kansas ethanol plants, the only place in the nation. So I guess that was a harbinger of this sorghum change that we'd seen there. And other than that, the the decline in uh, ending stocks for corn, anticipate ending stocks down to 1.54 billion, now raises the stakes for any weather risk that would come in and present itself in spring, summer 2024. So it's to me, it's always amazing that the fine-tuned view that we have of what's risky or not. I don't know. You can see we're much more risky at 1.54 billion bushels ending stocks as we were at 1.7, but it has the market's attention and has given us some boost in prices and I think probably makes for a more volatile upside situation heading off into spring planting than we had before.
That was K-State grain economist Dan O'Brien. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but stick around because when we come back from that break, we'll once again be joined by Dan O'Brien as he continues his conversation.